Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another teleconsultation organized by the Asian Banker. I am Fu Boon Ping. I'm the managing editor of the Asian Banker. I'd like to welcome you to this session, and I'm very glad to be running this session with a panel of distinguished guests this afternoon. Now, the topic for our discussion today is how should your bank leverage on customer insight? Now, today's session is brought to you by the Retail Banking Working Group under the One Big Question agenda. As some of you may know, the Retail Banking Working Group is a member-based program to help retail financial institutions track and discuss strategic issues facing practitioners in the industry. This program delivers in-depth market and strategic research in the form of individual bank profile, benchmarking research, research note, interview, survey, and case studies. Now, as part of the One Big Question, today we have a discussion to address some of the practical problems that bankers across the region are facing, especially in this area of customer insight. And we want to deal with some of the real and practical issues about execution, about how do you implement a workable customer insight program for banks around the region. Now, in the lead up to the One Big Question teleconsultation session, our team of researchers have been talking to industry experts and practitioners, and we'll share some of the insight with you in a while. Now, a bit of background for the topic. Today's empowered consumer represent an interesting paradox for banking. Banks have never had more tools to reach consumer, but yet it's never been harder now to truly engage them. There are so many channels that we're getting customer feedback, customer insight. Now, which one of this do we tap, and how do we integrate all this information together in a meaningful way that the bank can use? Now, most advertising is tuned out by consumer today, and brands struggle to value the impact across all these new options that are available to them. So some of the key questions that we will be addressing today, some of it may be very relevant and of impact to you. How do you understand your customer better? And how are you able to carry out a more relevant and personal conversation with your customers? And now, how does that translate to your bank's offering to the customers? And how does that impact your customers' relationship with you? And in the end, does it mean that they will do more business with your bank? Now, how do we need to refine customer insight, customer data? There are proliferation of channels, segments. There are new regulatory issues that we have to contend with. How do we deal with all these things? How do we leverage customer insight for sales, for revenue, and for productivity, and as well as profitability growth? How do we measure them? What's the ROI on all the research on customers? And also a related issue, and not any less important, is in technology. Technology is catching up with what financial services can deliver for the customers. How do we integrate that into the offering? Okay, we'll have ample time in a while to answer some of these questions, but I guess a lot of our callers will have questions that they want to ask. Just give you some house rules as to how you can ask these questions. The link to the teleconsultation has been sent to all of you, so you can log in from your computer to follow the presentation on your screen, okay, as the presenter is going through them. To ask a question, you have two options. You can type out your question into the chat box at the bottom right corner of the WebEx screen, or you can press the hand icon below the list of attendees in the right column of your screen. This will register your intention with us, and we'll open the line for you. Okay. Now, next, I'd like to introduce our panel, who will be going through some insights that they will share with us. And the way that we will run the session today is we will allow all of our four speakers to make their comments, and we will then address the questions after all four panelists have spoken. Okay, now to introduce them, first we have Mr. David McQuillan. He heads OCBC Bank initiative on building a stronger customer focus within its bank. He heads the customer experience department. Now, next we have Mr. Chin Man Hong, who is head of market research at OCBC. Man Hong drives the market research services at the bank and helps the bank better understand what customer needs. Next, we have Ms. Saloni Raman-Krishna. Saloni is the principal architect for Oracle Financial Services analytical application at Oracle Financial Services. So, and also we have Mr. Guang Chen Hao, who is a research analyst at the Asian Banker. Recently, Chen Hao has done some research on this question, whether banks find consumer insight key to building bank profitability. So we'll let Chen Hao share with us a brief overview of the survey and some of the key findings.
Hello, thanks. Thanks, Moping. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chen Hao, a researcher at the Asian Banker. It's my pleasure today to share with you some of our recent online voting and phone survey findings on customer insights. Before I start, I want to quickly give you updates, information about our survey, about this one big question survey. We decided to launch this one big question session about customer insights is because we continue to realize market trend that the retail financial services has moved from a customer focus to customer obsessed. Staying competitive, profitable, and providing the best customer experience are the top goals for many organizations. And knowing your customer and prospects through the right information is critical to achieve all these goals. So for this particular survey and online voting, we have received more than 80 to 100 participating votes from both mature and emerging markets, which includes Singapore, China, Hong Kong, Malaysia. We ask banks, do you think better customer insights can be the key to profitability and why? So in the next 5 minutes, I will use 3 to 4 slides to share with you some of our part of our interest findings. So let's start with our first slide. As you can see, more than 70% respondents shows there is a strong positive correlations between bank's customer insights capability and the product or portfolio profitability. So they believe better understanding about customer can drive the sales growth and marketing effectiveness. In fact, the response showed no major difference between the markets in the mature market and emerging markets. Top retail banks in Singapore or and China are actually sharing the similar view about the importance of customer insights. However, they leverage the customer insights in different ways. Emerging markets such as China, Malaysia, or Thailand are focused on using customer information to offering wider range of products or service to satisfy the client demand. And banks in Hong Kong or Singapore, especially in Singapore, have started to think more about using these insights or customer preference to simplify the customer onboarding experience and marketing effectiveness. So next slide. We also break up our response by size. So as you can see, most large and medium-sized banks believe that to succeed in today's marketplace, retail banks should focus on extracting significantly more value from the data sets, such as big data phenomenon, unstructured data like social media. According to our research, we found that data analytics and CRM capability were the top technology priorities in 2011 for banks in mature markets. And also, they are the top 3 priorities in emerging markets such as China, Malaysia, and Thailand. Moving to the next slide. Okay, One point I want to add is as compared to large players, actually smaller banks believe less in customer insights. We think it is because they think size also significantly matters for banks, especially for retail financial services. Moving to my last slides, our survey and voting also indicates that the middle-level bankers expect more potential benefits from stronger customer insights capability. Bankers actually holding different point of view in terms of customer insights. As you can see, some of them believe that leverage on customer behavior patterns can maximize banks' ability to meet different customer preferences and eventually enhance cross-selling, retention ratio, as well as profitability. But some others believe reliability and as well as cost management are more important. Yes, so that will be all from my side today. So now I will pass the time to Dongping. Thank you all for listening. Thanks.
Okay, Chen Hao, thank you for those insights, very interesting insight. Now, next we'll call on David to share the perspective from OCBC. Now, David, we've heard Chen Hao mention some of the uses for customer insight. Some banks are using it for product development. Some are looking at it in terms of enhancing the marketing effectiveness. Now, could you share with us at OCBC, how are you using customer insight? David?
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry about that.
Did you hear my question? I lead in.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that we were on mute there. So could you bring my slide up?
Okay.
Yeah, great. This is the only slide that we have. A little bit of background, on what we're doing with customer insight at OCBC. A few years ago, when I joined the bank, I was tasked with helping OCBC become a far more customer-focused bank than it was at the moment. And together with our head of market research, we sat down and we realized that most banks tend to think about customer insight in one or maybe two areas. They're using an annual customer satisfaction tracker, or maybe they do an ad hoc piece of research to try and innovate every once in a while at the whim of a manager, or maybe they use CRM from time to time to try and look at a particular segment. And we thought that this was kind of a scattergun approach and wasn't really focused on creating sustainable customer insights. And so our attention shifted at OCBC to creating a true customer insight capability. And that meant building functions that allowed us to get customer insights at every stage of the product development and management process. So if you look at the framework that we've got up here, you'll see how we think about what business should have in place if you want to have true customer focus. And each green box represents a particular kind of market research tool or activity. So for instance, we think about customer insight in three main areas: getting insights into how your brand is positioned and how you're communicating, into how to develop new value propositions and find out how customers feel about the ones you already have in the market. And lastly, on customer touch points, or your actual customer experience. How do you create new touch points and improve those, and then track how customers feel? So across those three main areas, you can see that we've built 9 different kind of research tools, from foundation tools in brand positioning and communication, like brand equity and driver studies, all the way down to brand tracking surveys. From in value proposition, really we've got the ability to do segmentation and understand key met and unmet customer needs in segments, which allows us to do new product development research, basically around kind of innovation. And then once we've tested and refined those value propositions, we can put trackers in place to see how customers feel about us. And if we just talk about trackers for a minute, we actually do over 8,000 customer interviews a month, over 21 customer touch points, asking them, how do they feel about their experiences with OCBC. So we really have our finger on the pulse about how our customers feel about us. And in our brand tracking surveys, under the brand positioning and communication, we also have a sense about how everybody else's customers feel about your banks. So we have a fairly comprehensive market research capability in place now that allows us to do everything from innovate down to marketing effectiveness, advertising studies, and tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just one last point. This has taken us about 2.5 years to build.
Okay, great, David. Okay, you have this framework in place, and I'm sure the market research customer insight capability requires cross-functional and cross-discipline inputs as well. Perhaps you can broadly share how do you work with marketing, product people, business finance, in terms of either marketing or product development process down to tracking profitability.
Sure. So I think one thing that's important to know about the customer experience at OCBC is our market research function does not sit within marketing. When market research sits within marketing, it tends to be used almost exclusively for marketing activities, right? Your advertising, communication, and not much else. Because we are a group function and we don't report to any one division, we're our own division, our research capability is used across all divisions, from new product development with our products folks, with IT, with operations, with division business leaders in our retail and corporate banking, all the way down to our touchpoint owners. Now, this allows us to be truly objective and independent and represent the customer's view, right? There's no inherent bias. We don't have a stake in anyone's project, so we can be really honest about how customers feel, which is what our business partners are looking for. Not sure if that completely answers your question, but let me know.
Okay, so but in terms of some of these processes, for example, product development, you will play a support role or leading role in terms of working with product people. How do you deploy some of your insight into what they are doing? Could you share a bit of insight on that? From a group function to the line function.
Yeah, okay, this is Man Hong here. Yes, I think to answer your question is, in practice, both. Of course, there are times, I think, as usual, we may come in halfway through the product development, the time frame. So we might do a product test, for example, in those situations. But I think that was probably what was going on in the first year or so when we set up the department. But I think in the recent year or so, we have been the ones who doing more of the work on innovation and understanding needs and beginning, and we were now in the position to actually suggest new ideas, right, to the business, and so we are actually now engaged throughout, I think, the whole the product development process.
I think, maybe, typically what's happening now is maybe the head of one of our segments will come to us and say, hey, we really want to bring something new to market for this segment. Can you help us understand them more? We will design a research approach focused on whatever their business problem is. We'll go out together with our business partners, because we do collaborative research. Together with our business partner, we'll go out, we'll run the study, try and identify the key insights, the key unmet customer needs, and then use that to inform their product strategy going forward. And then this is also then when we hand it over to our experienced design team, which starts building prototypes of new products or services to test with customers.
Okay, great. Okay, just before I hand this over to Saloni, maybe one final question. In terms of metrics and measurement, the customer experience function, what are your KPIs so far as having financial KPIs? Could you share insight in terms of revenue or profitability? How does that tie in with your partners in product or in marketing?
Sure. Any project that we get in customer experience, we're very focused on the business metrics that we're trying to improve, whether that's conversion rates, or reduction in errors, or or sales. So when we start working, taking customer insights and working on new designs, we're very focused on that. And we've got some very nice stories. We've got investment products that after redesigning the experience, we increased sales 150%. We've got insurance products that we increased sales 600% after improving the customer experience. We've got projects where we reduced customer error rates by over 80% after redesigning customer touch points based on customer insight. We've got customer satisfaction that we increased by 300%. So, these are the kinds of metrics and that we're very focused on every project. We don't do this just for fun. We do it because delivering great customer experiences makes great business sense.
Great, wonderful story there, David. Okay, next we'll have Saloni to share with us some insights from Orica. We know that she's driving a much integrated approach towards building better customer insight. So we'll be interested to hear her perspective on how technology has caught up in supporting banks on making use of customer data and how they analyze it. Saloni, over to you.
Thank you very much. And David, I think that was a fantastic statement saying, better customer experience is better business. I mean, at the end of the day, customer is business and everything else is expense. So that was, I think, a very apt quote. Just moving on the slide, what I really wanted to do in the short time that I have is to pick up those observations that you, as audience, have given us for the one big question poll. Next, please. Next, and the next slide. So I just wanted to discuss with you two things. One, what we heard when we met banks, and secondly, what we heard from you as response to the one big question. So the first one, I really want to go to what we have heard when we met bankers. So the next slide, please. So I think the interesting observations were that, with the increasing regulatory landscape, there are some things which are mandatory, which banks need to follow, and therefore that definitely added to cost. So they will hit on two sides was what the customer side of the executives told us. One, there is increased cost on compliance, and secondly, the fee-based revenue is coming down because of the competitive pressures. Now, given these two, there is also shrinking of budgets, and therefore there is a higher need for focusing on the marketing spend. The third point that bankers made to us was that the product differentiation is not giving the competitive edge it was giving earlier. We just heard David speak of how they are continuously reinventing themselves, reinventing the products, reinventing the positioning to keep that competitive edge on. Other point was that, the acquiring of new customer is always more expensive than retaining a good customer. This is proven multiple times over. So the focus is shifting from acquiring customers to retaining profitable customers, and therefore retaining and deepening relationships with profitable customers. So the engagement model is really moving towards relationship banking, and one of the leaders in Singapore, OCBC, has just spoken to us on how they are looking at this. So just summarizing this slide, what we heard from you, what we heard from the banks is that there is pressure on funds that are available for marketing spend. There is pressure on the returns, both the top line and bottom line, and therefore the focus is shifting to retaining identified profitable customers. Next slide, please. This is what Chenho spoke of earlier. These were some of the comments that you, as audience for this one big question, as a respondent, have said. There were some interesting themes in each of these questions and responses, and so I'd like to pick up those themes in my subsequent slides. So moving on to the next slide. The statement from you was, knowing your customers, their behavioral patterns, their preferences, and what they are concerned about is the best way to develop tailored strategies that aim at addressing the barriers and leveraging the preferences to drive the desired behavior. So if you really look at this, the theme that emerges is forward-looking. The entire strategy planning is about forward-looking of how the customers could behave or customers would demand. So that takes us to the definition of customer insight. And if you really look at that definition, broadly speaking, is the understanding of customers' product relationships and profitability, both current, and notice I've highlighted the word potential, and risk propensity. So the theme one is it is forward-looking. It is the need to understand the customer and his potential behavior so that the banks kind of plan and are ready for the customer as per his or her needs. Next slide, please. The second one is, it is the market that determines, the second comment we received was, it is the market that determines pricing. Profitability is the ability to service that need at the market price at a cost below competition. So the earlier observation brought to front the theme of forward-looking, and this statement brings to forth the theme performance is critical. So you're looking at performance from a customer point of view. You're looking at building up your profitability statement from customer accounts up, as opposed to just doing it from the GL side or the general ledger side. You are wanting to understand number of customers, what is the attrition rate, what are the number of new customers, how are the credit losses, what are the marketing expenses, and so on and so forth. So theme 2 is performance, building P&L, customer accounts-based P&L is the second theme, so that you stay competitive. The third one, please. The next slide. The third theme that we heard was, one of you said, I would put a premium on reliability and trustworthiness and service. Now this has two aspects to it, or rather three. So it's data, processes, and people. So when you look at reliability, trustworthiness, and service, we're looking at three things. Firstly, the continuous problem called data. Because all the customer insights, the insight that you're getting both from a customer viewpoint and from a product and business, is through the data that you've captured and are managing. So I just took some poetic liberty of using, water everywhere, not a drop to drink, to kind of fit here as data everywhere, but not a bicycle. So the first requirement is data reliability, trustworthiness. Second is the processes and their reliability. And finally, the people who deliver this service, the customer service, their reliability, trustworthiness, and service. because at the end state, the customer needs to feel what has been promised is what is delivered. So the third theme is about reliability and trustworthiness. The last theme, next slide. The last theme is really on overall view of customer from profile, affordability, products, profitability, and risk will enable the bank to understand the customer better, hence able to sell only the relevant products as well as better risk management. So really the fourth theme is really interesting and is as interesting and telling of our current financial services industry status, which is the need for a 360-degree view of customer. Now, we have been speaking of a 360-degree view of customer for quite some time now. But you notice in this comment by one of you, you've talked of not just the customer and his or her relationship with the bank in terms of types of accounts, number of accounts, volumes, relationship depth, etc. You are also speaking of performance or the profitability of the customer as well as the risk that the customer brings to table. So you're really wanting to look at a complete 360-degree view of the customer as opposed to just one part of the story. So really the entire overlap that we're talking of is what we're looking at. And these were statements from you as response to this one big question. So quickly going through the four themes. One is forward-looking. Second is performance or the overall bottom line and top line impact. Third theme is that of reliability and trustworthiness of data, people, and processes. And the fourth theme was really the need for a true 360-degree view of the customer. And these four themes, I think, nicely sum up the subject that we are speaking of, where we are saying that customer insights will need to enable banks to make a better impact on their top line, bottom line, and to do so, banks need capability to have forward-looking insights in addition to the current and past, need to have data, processes, people who are reliable, and need to look at customer in a more holistic and comprehensive manner than just in one particular situation. So this is really the summary that I wanted to share with all of you today, more as my view of what we heard from you all in our interactions as well as responses to one big question. Back to you.
Okay, thanks, Saloni, for that insight. Okay, I probably got one question for you. You mentioned that there's a whole host of data that is available to banks today, and earlier we heard from David and Manhon about their comprehensive consumer insight capabilities. So essentially, you have data that comes from the bank's internal system, transactional data, so on and so forth. And you have also customized customer insight that comes from research, comes from very customized and specific questions around a problem, around a product, around a product question. So how do you prioritize the data in terms of which one to focus on and what data to use for what purpose? Probably this question I can ask for both Saloni and Manhon and David.
So just responding to your question, I think the first part of it is, I think your second bit of the question answers your first part, which is really saying, how do we prioritize information? Now, data could be different ways, like you rightly said, from the transactions, from the contract information that we have, and also perhaps service level conversations, the non-financial transactions that customer has. So the problem of finding a needle in a haystack is what needs to get answered. So the data first, the capture of data, the arrangement of data, the questions these data chooses to answer, that has to be clear. I think the blueprint, the data map blueprint has to be drawn up in such a way that each set of data answer a set of questions, and they then become the, the compass for what to do next. So transaction data and contract-related data might help us in looking at what are the preferred channels, what are the preferred products, what are the kind of features that are liked. Now, the service level inputs or the interactions between the customer and the bank, those might actually say where is it that their loopholes are and which need to be plugged. So really, each of the sets of data and information answer different questions. Understanding that and drawing up your blueprint, your data map, I think is one of the very critical actions, my thoughts.
David, Manhong, any insight to share in terms of as part of your comprehensive insight? Is it just based on research data? How much of internal transactional data do you use?
Well, we use both, but I think the key is really getting very clear on what business problem you're trying to solve, what business question you have. Only when you're really sure about the question you're trying to answer can you start to figure out what kind of insights do you need to answer that question. Whether that's qualitative research from going out and having conversations with customers, or whether it's down to behavioral data on what customers are actually doing with their money in your bank. I suppose it's a bit art and science trying to bring those things together. Manhong?
Yeah, I think we do both. We work closely with our data analytics team. Often we do joint analysis between research through consumer interviews as well as the databases that we have internally. So it's something that I think initially for OCBC it's something that we're not used to, but I think in recent times we've been working closer together, and I think we have found that by this kind of working arrangement we do get better insights. Okay.
Okay, Manhong, that process you mentioned that OCBC is just getting into, is that a formalized process? Is it a process that you go through for every of your initiatives? Are there structure process flow, templates, so on and so forth, or it is at this point still ad hoc?
I don't think there's a formal process. We actually try to make it something that they will come to us. They will come to us sort of naturally. But of course, the important thing is actually skill sets. To make sure that the guys that we have is comfortable using different types of data.
Okay, thanks, Manhong, for that. Now, at this point, I just want to remind our caller that we are open to questions from you. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are two ways for you to participate. One is to type your question directly into the chat box at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. The other is to press the hand icon below the list of attendees, and that will send a signal to us, and we can then open the line for you to ask your question directly. Okay, now at this point, I also want to ask, now one of the probably showpiece of the customer experience at OCBC is the Frank initiative, probably as an end-to-end product development cycle. David and Manhong, would you like to share with us the steps that were involved, and maybe share with us some of the results of that initiative as well? Thanks.
Sure. Well, I think if we're looking at the Frank by OCBC, which for those that don't know is the new bank we launched for Gen Y, 18 to 28-year-olds, that's really the result of lots of different kinds of customer insights. The first was insights into our actual customer base, which we saw a gap in Gen Y and their conversion into young families with salary accounts. So, really using behavioral data. Then the next set of insights we got was based on ethnographic research of actually going out and following Gen Y around shopping malls and restaurants and bars and the city and having conversations with them and really trying to understand their lives, not just how they felt about banks, but just try to understand their lives and how they relate to money quite deeply. So very qualitative insights that we organized and helped shape the brand positioning that we knew a new bank had to have, and the value propositions that we needed to bring to market. Then we began prototyping concepts for those value propositions and channels, customer touch points, and doing more qualitative research by bringing customers in and doing prototype testing. Then we started to go into some quantitative research in which as our value proposition got sharper, we validated those ideas with quant studies, and everything down to the name, using both qualitative and quantitative research methods to help us narrow in on an ideal name for this new business. And today we run customer satisfaction trackers every day for Frank to see how customers feel about it, and we also monitor social media for customer sentiment about this business. So, we've used every kind of customer insight in the book to help us create this new business. It's doing very well, and it's gotten a lot of worldwide attention. It's quite an innovative concept. We get calls from banks in Russia asking us how we did it. So, and further afield than that. So, it's a nice example of how to use a lot of different kinds of customer insights to create something new.
Okay, I don't know whether you'll be able to share with us some financial metrics. I don't want to put you on the spot, but in terms of growth, in terms of the segment, AUM growth.
No, but we're very happy with how Frank is going.
Okay, great. Okay, now we have a question that's come out from the audience. Now you mentioned you do 8,000 customer feedback every month through 21 channels. How are you doing this research? Is it done internally? Is this outsourced? How do you work with vendors? And how do you ensure quality of data, so on and so forth?
Okay, this is Ty. I can answer the question. This is all done. All the work around the design and the analysis is done in-house. We feel that this is too important to outsource anyway. But of course, when it comes to the field work, we deploy a variety of ways. So internet banking, obviously, we do it through the internet. For some of the touch points like branches and so on, we still do phone interviews. We extract the data the day after the transaction, and we try to call as soon after the transaction so that people still remember exactly what happened. So for contact center, it's still done through the phone and so on. So we are now trying to move it online to the mobile phone and different ways of collecting information. The most important thing for us is to manage is speed, to actually get the interviews done as soon as the transaction is over so that people remember. And I think when we start to analyze the quality of the responses that we get, whenever we do the interviews quickly, we find that the quality of the response it improves. But all the analysis is done in-house. So we create the data warehouse that allows us to house all the data. We also got an online distribution tool so that we allow our stakeholders. This is quite different than other banks. We have an online tool that allows people to do their own analysis. So, for example, the branch manager in Ang Mo Kio could actually could actually go into the system and find out how is his branch doing compared to other branches. How were the people they interviewed, let's say last week or even the day before? How are people responding? Yeah.
Thanks, Maha. Now, in terms of, we got another question in terms of the deployment of the data. Now, is there a process or is it decentralized? Is it like you give the example, branch manager, at Ang Mo Kio looking at the data? Is there a specific method that they look at the data and they are coached to apply it or put the data into action for improvement program? How do you do that? Is it just dissemination of data and each stakeholder do whatever they please, or there is a specific way that you work around it?
No, all of our customer touch points have very specific customer satisfaction targets, and every touch point is held accountable to reach those targets. They're provided with the data online so they can access it, including all the customer verbatims. We provide monthly reports to our CEO and division heads on how every touch point is doing. And then in a monthly meeting with the CEO and direct reports, we analyze where every touch point is in relation to their targets. And if they're underperforming, they have to explain why. And if they're overperforming, they also can share with everyone else what they've tried that has worked.
Okay, great, David. Okay, I think we've got a caller who wants to ask a question directly. So to the caller, we have Chow In Lee. Okay, your line is open now. You can ask your question.
Okay, hi. My question is to David. Out of your 9 tools, right, there was one that talks about experience labs. Could you elaborate? How do you do that?
Yeah, sure. Experience labs are a technique we use to test prototypes of, and that can be anything, a product, a website, a form, statements, whatever. We have our own testing facility here at OCBC in which we'll bring customers in and we'll sit down with them. We have a lot of cameras and software that help us track what customers actually do with the prototype. And in the second room, we have stakeholders who watch what the customer is actually doing and listen to what the customer is actually saying so that they can see the customer experience. And then we have a debrief after each session in which we identify things that have to improve in the prototype. That at a high level is our experience lab methodology. There's more to it, but that's basically it.
Thanks. So from that experience, is there any specific insights that you were able to implement as a result of this lab?
Well, we use tons of labs. We use labs on almost every new product or customer touchpoint project. So, for instance, OCBC launched a new website about a month and a half ago. That website was developed in our experience labs. The Frank account was a concept developed in our experience labs through testing. Our mobile phone application, all of our new forms, our plain English contracts, new credit card value propositions. These have all been basically any kind of idea we have, whether product or touch point, gets brought into the lab to test with customers. And then we refine it and then we take it to market.
Okay, Ines, sorry, I think we'll let you ask 2 questions. Then we'll move on with, now I've got a question for Salonis. Saloni, we hear from OCBC's experience and they really have a very comprehensive customer insight capability as well as a framework. From your experience, from your perspective, how are the other banks doing it? And from in terms of use of technology, for example, social media, crowdsourcing for ideas and all those things, could you share some insight? Thanks.
I think the biggest change that we see and we hear is the speed. social media is something that, that hits you just overnight or maybe in few hours. So what we're seeing customers do, what we're seeing banks do really is look at two aspects of life. One is the experience with the contracts, with the transactions, with the customer interactions directly with the bank. And the second block is that which is the social media phenomenon, the sentiment that David referred a little earlier. So between these two, there is we see banks grappling, trying to create that bridge of how do they understand that sentiment and how do they bring it in. The only challenge with sentiment which all banks have expressed is the need for a continuous play in that space, because the sentiment can turn in an hour. And therefore, that speed of response is one thing that banks are, kind of grappling with and are trying to kind of see how they can make that part of their business. We've just heard OCBC say that, they pick this up, then bring it to the experiment lab, and then take it back to the business and, out into the market. So that entire cycle, closing that loop is something that we see banks starting to look at. There are some market leaders, there are some who are trying to be in that space. So what we really see is trying to marry these two sets of information that banks have in response to their customers, their markets, the entire aspect of the direct interactions with the bank, and secondly, amongst user groups like social media.
Okay, great, Saloni. Interesting point that you brought out in terms of the speed of response. David, Mahan, just want to kind of get your input and your insight in terms of what's a typical cycle like from some of this research that you do, from the identification of a need to a deployment of a solution. If you can share some insights. Thanks.
Boy, there's no easy answer to that one. I mean, the answer is it depends. If we're talking about a large-scale project, say, for instance, Frank, going from the key qualitative insights that allowed us to figure out an innovative new direction to bringing something to market, you're talking about a year and a half. But that's mainly driven by the timeline of bringing a new business to market. But at the other end of the spectrum, we've done experience labs, and we've changed things within 24 hours. It all depends on the project, what you're trying to improve, the scale of that improvement, the willingness of the team to make changes. If you've got a project team that is really open and ready to listen to what customers say and willing to make changes based on that, then you're going to move faster than if you've got a team that's skeptical and has never listened to customers in the past.
Okay, David, now, in terms of customer experience, does it also include engaging customers? For example, increasingly customers are engaging banks through social media. Does your area cover engaging customers with responses through social media, for example? And how are you engaging, not just using the data, but going back to customers? Now that you're getting all this data, does it create an expectation from the customers for you to respond quicker or in a more accommodative fashion to what they want? Does it create a burden then on the bank?
Oh, well, I don't think we can ever say that having conversations with our customers is a burden. Having conversations with our customers is enlightening and allows us to be more successful. It's just a little, but having said that, having conversations with your customers is harder than ignoring them, and a lot of folks who don't have the appetite to do that are more comfortable ignoring them. But at OCBC, being quite a customer-focused business, we're very into having conversations with our customers. Now, that's why we do it so often. With social media, coming to the first part of your question, yes, in the customer experience division, we will typically outline what, say, a social media engagement approach would be for something like Frank, which we designed on how the business should engage with customers on Twitter, Facebook. We don't actually run it, although we did run the Twitter account for a little while when it was first getting set up. But we then push that out to our frontline staff, who then run it and interact with customers. I think if you look at the Frank Twitter feed, for example, you'll see an incredibly engaged group of customers and employees who are running it. These conversations in such a public sphere generate a lot of great insights, a lot of fantastic insights that can help further innovate. Now, I think the market research community is only now starting to come to terms with how to do that, and it's something that we're working on at OCBC because it's such unstructured data, such kind of free-form qualitative stuff. How do you organize it? What's most important? And this is, I think, where you're going to see the greatest amount of effort going forward in terms of developing new kinds of tools to get insights out of social media.
Okay, great, David. Now we've got a caller who's interested to find out about the organization and the structure of your team in terms of size, in terms of how do you organize yourself? Different teams. If you can just share some light on this.
Sure. The customer experience division has 3 teams. Like I said, we're a group function, so we don't report to any business division. So we act like an internal consultancy. Divisions can come to us for help. Of the 3 teams that we have, the first one is our market research team, which is headed up by Munhong, and that runs tracking and ad hoc qualitative and quantitative research. The second team is experience design. These are professional designers. These folks are rarely, if ever, seen in a bank. They design websites, buildings, forms, statements, processes, products, contracts, you name it. Their skill sets are around architecture, graphic design, information architecture, human factors, usability, skills, like I said, not often seen in a bank. Our head of experience design is an architect by trade. And then our last team is around culture and training, in which we run training programs to teach the rest of the bank basic market research and experience design skills. And we run award programs to recognize employees who are delivering great customer experiences. These are the three teams, and we're about 23 people.
Great. We have a caller who's interested I guess in the pros or cons of using internal resource for designing of research versus external agency. I guess one of the key areas would be the availability of internal know-how and resources. From your perspective, of course, I'm sure you say it is much more powerful to have internal people who understand the processes, the products and stuff to design the research.
Yes. I can take this question. One of the key things that we decided on when we started the market research department was that it should be an in-house capability. So we went out to recruit people from the market research industry. So we didn't, and the expectation is that they will design the work. Obviously that means things like the methodology, the questionnaire, and then when the data comes in, they will then go through the raw data, organize it, use SPSS or whatever it takes to do the analysis. If you need to do any advanced analysis on the data, that's also available. So we find that, and I think for core research, I think we are quite unique in banking. In fact, in Singapore, is that we actually do have a head of core who actually do the interviews herself and so on. So and basically, okay, let me tell you this. Talk about why. Okay, why we do this. we actually find that when we do it in-house, we understand the business better. I think as you say, but also we also went out to make sure that we get very good researchers who can design, who can analyze well, and also of course the other thing it brings to the bank is obviously it is from the cost point of view is actually better for us. So we will outsource maybe the field work. So we'll work with the field agencies, whether it's in online surveys or whether it's through the phone or through, but we work with the field agency to do it. And of course we, I think through the years we saved the bank a lot of money on that as well. Okay.
I think that to sum that point up, we believe that customer insight is critical to our future success. So we're not going to abdicate that or outsource thinking about what the customer insights are. That's something that we want to do, and we believe that we need to do the heavy lifting in order to add the most value to the business.
Great. Okay. I think on that note, David, and Saloni, as we're having such an interesting conversation, time flies. So we are up to 1 hour now. So we have to end the session now. But just want to give you all opportunity to have a final comment, if any. Maybe starting with Saloni.
Yes. Thanks. I think fundamentally a couple of very important observations I wanted to make. One, about how the entire industry and the definition of insight is moving into a forward-looking idea. Secondly, the aspect of, a bank understands its business and its customers best. But the partnership between the bank and technology is what needs to be looked at. One in exclusion of the other wouldn't deliver a result. So clearly, banks understand their customers, their businesses well, and they definitely need to lead this as a supplement statement to the earlier question. The partnership of how to use technology, how to use social media, how to use the other tools that are available in order to make the customers feel special is really the entire journey about. And I think we're all entering into some very exciting phase where on one side we are challenged with mountains of data and we are searching for needles of wisdom, and on the other side where we are looking at kind of speed of response that market is looking for, not to mention competition and regulation. So I think it's an exciting phase to be in and an exciting phase to kind of be the first or the fastest to get to the goalpost of understanding a moving target called customer preferences.
David Mahong, any final comments?
Yeah, I would just say that I think when it comes to customer insights and being successful with it, it's really about mindset. And if anyone's going into customer insights to improve profitability, then you are only going to achieve incremental change. You can't look at it like that. You need to be externally focused, not internally focused. And by that I mean when you look at customer insights, you should be looking for ways to improve the lives of your customers and solve their problems. When you do that, then you can innovate and you can truly transform.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, great. I guess that's one important point for all our banks, our colleagues in the industry, is the mindset change. Less internally focused or even silo focused, but focus on the customers. Okay, now I would just like to summarize the top points, the key points that we discussed today. One is on creating and delivering what is a market leading consumer research organization, knowing very clearly what are the problems they are looking to solve and structuring your customer insight organization around that, refining customer data to better understand what your customer wants, and increasingly in terms of what technology can bring in terms of helping us analyze data, increasingly in new areas like social media, although at this point it's still in a very nascent and emerging state. And also what is important is in terms of driving accountability and being able to attribute results to your customer insight initiative, as David and Man Hong have shared, with the many examples where they have been able to demonstrate how customer insight has helped improve initiatives outcome. So on that note, we'd like to thank David, Man Hong, Saloni, as well as Chen Hao for their sharing today. We'd like to thank all callers, all our members of the working group for calling in. We hope you had a good session, that you've been able to take many things out from here to apply to your organization. Please also note that the proceeding from this session will be available on our website. If you have, now we are doing consumer insight as well, so if any of our callers have any feedback for us, do write to us, questions, ideas, suggestions. On that note, we just want to thank everyone, and we look forward to engaging you again. Bye.